Hello guys, and welcome back to another draft review. Today we've got one from the LCS, still on patch 14.15, and if you've seen the thumbnail, you already know what I don't like about this draft. But we have FlyQuest versus Cloud9 in a best of 3. So let's talk a little bit about the bans. We got Nidalee, Renekton, Yone. All of this is engage, which signals to me, all of this is early game 2, especially Nidalee, Renekton. So this signals to me that you're trying to play scaling range. So you're trying to play like Ez or Zeri or maybe something like an Asol. You know, these sorts of scaling range Ziggs, these sort of things, okay? Things that really don't, maybe not Ez Zeri so much, maybe more like a Varus or something. Asol, Xerath, like these kinds of champions, where the engage potential of Nidalee Renekton and the early power offsets your weak lanes, and then it's hard for you to deal with the engage with these high range picks. Now, blue side bans have a lot of freedom. Red side, I think there's some really clear-cut bans. I think on this patch, Aurora is definitely one of them. Ezreal is okay, Kalista okay, but I think there's some champions that have slipped through that are really OP. There is Ashe, there is Rumble. These are things that when you watch LCK, they're banned pretty much all the time. There is also Ivern, I think is one of the best champions in the game right now. And there is also Varus. I am a big believer that Varus top is probably the best top laner in the game right now. Very, very flexible in terms of theme and build, and can also flex into multiple roles. So those are some things that I would have liked to see banned, and these are some B1s that I would like from the side of FlyQuest. What we actually get is B1 Lilia. Lilia, to me, she's like a hybrid between range and engage. When the enemy's running at you, she's kind of hard to play. When they're getting on you, you're quite squishy. You're not the beefiest champion. If they can get inside your Q radius like this, if they can get into here, then you're not hitting them with the outside of your Q. She's quite good at like kiting and spacing, but if the enemies can get directly on top of you, it can be really hard to play Lilia. So I think Lilia's best as a sort of high range using the E, using the different burn, and then running in and out of range, playing as like a midpoint between engage, like going in and poking. She's like a midway between that. Like there's some things like Lilia MF. This is one of the best sort of crosses between range and engage in the game. It is literally very high range engage, but it also just has high range in general. So that's one thing I think. So Lilia is quite flexible. The one thing is like top. Maybe in the right matchup, matchup Bwipo would bring out top Lilia, but I do think this is just a jungle blind, so there's no role flex in this. So it's not the most flexible and it's not the most OP champ in the game. Now, one thing is that this is the AP jungle, aside from Nidalee, this is the AP jungle that I think struggles versus Ivern the least. So I now think Ivern is sort of out of the question for both teams. The reason for that is that Ivern can struggle to deal with Lilia plus hard engage, whereas compared to stuff like Zyra plus Corki, where you can just heal and shield through all of the range damage, Lilia is much harder for Ivern to deal with. If we look onto the B1, B2, FlyQuest are doing something very similar to what we saw from Mad Lions yesterday, actually. They're picking two flexible high-range carries. Okay, these are both ADCs, so we're probably looking for AP jungle on 3. This is the same line that we saw from Mad Lions. I think, did Mad Lions do Corki Ezreal? But they're doing Corki Zeri. Again, both of these they're like mid ADC flex, but also if you have the right player, I don't know Thanatos' proficiency on range top, but both of these can also go top. So we've seen both of these. We saw both of them top in the Mad Lions G2 series, right? So these are very, very flexible champions. The one thing that they're not great at, these two to me are like disengage and range hybrid, which is good against the range slash engage hybrid we have here, because if they pursue this line with the engage, we can pursue this, and if they pursue range, we have our own range to match. Ideally, if they pursued range, we would have some engage into it. If they picked, like, I don't know, MF Zerath or something, we would want more engage than this. But it's okay. So let's continue on. So we're quite flexible on the side of C9 right now, and so far I much prefer C9's draft. It has more angles it can go, I think. What you're looking for on FlyQuest combined with Lilia is probably some sort of AD mid flex, and then you're maybe looking for any other flexible pick that can play either engage or range. So maybe you pick like an AD carry that can go mid, and you also pick like a support champion. Or you pick, maybe you pick like an AD carry that can go mid, and you pick a support that can go bot with the AD carry that you pick. I feel like that would be the best line. Okay, we're looking at Misfortune. I think this would be really good. This doesn't necessarily go mid. I don't think Misfortune mid is a thing, though maybe it's playable into these two champions. Maybe it's actually okay. But Lilia Misfortune is really, really potent. And into the range that we have here, we need some like really strong engage. While it doesn't actually like lose out too hard on the range battle, it does lose out, don't get me wrong. But this forces some really key defensive tools here. Now, I do think the best answer here to the MF would be the Braum. Bringing the Braum shield into the MF. But yeah, another thing we could look for is we could look for something like this is something that obviously your AD carry has to be proficient in order to flex it, but I think it's quite good with the Lilia. We could look for support with knockup plus Yasuo, and then you can either play Yas Lilia mid jungle, or you can play Yasuo with support, and I think Yasuo is quite strong into the double ranged very wind wallable comp that we see so far. So those are two lines that I would like more than what we actually see, which is Lucian. Now, when we're going Lucian, this is a mid ADC flex, right? This is a champion that we see in both. I think I would much prefer Draven. Draven is stronger in the mid lane in isolation, and also has better lanes into a lot of the Zeri lanes in bot lane, because the pairings that you usually see with Lucian in bot lane would be Milio and Lulu. Not Lulu, sorry. Scratch that. We'll come back to Lulu. Milio and Nami. And some of the best lanes we've seen like ever against Lucian Nami or Lucian Milio has been either Zeri Lulu or Aphelios Lulu. Those have been the best Lucian Nami answers in lane that we've seen. So it's difficult with the Zeri being shown and Lulu being open to pick Nami slash Milio here. So that's kind of why I would prefer the line of Draven plus engage support. And then obviously you're worried about Braum or Tarek or something, like some defensive support here. So I think you want to play an engage support that can kind of maybe just Leona, right? Leona's open. The R obviously goes straight over the top of the Braum, and he's not the best at peeling Leona specifically. So I think Draven Leona would be much, much better than Lucian. It's more powerful and more flexible. We end up going for... Let's see. We end up going for Lucian Nautilus. Okay, so here we're combining with this. We have a little bit of range in the Lucian R, but with these two, we're indexing very heavily into engage now. We're showing a lot of engage. So I think you just start drafting disengage. You can keep the high range, of course, on red side, but I think you just want to start implementing disengage tools into your kit. Now you want an AP jungle. I think the best disengage AP jungle would probably be Zyra. Zyra would be pretty good. You could also go Mao, but the problem with Mao is that you get completely outpaced by the Lilia and she comes and sucks up all your camps. So I don't think Mao is the answer. I think Zyra is probably the answer, but I also like Brand. Brand's pretty good. So yeah, we end up going with the Brand here. Now the Nautilus, you're expecting this to go sup, right? But the problem is that Lucian Nautilus is not really a good lane in the same way that Lucian Nami or Lucian Milio is. Or to some extent like Lucian plus Yumi, right? We see that sometimes. It's not really the same level of dominance in lane and in the mid game. It's a very, very different lane. So I feel like this Nautilus pick here shows that this Lucian is going mid, which makes it much easier for red to draft, because now your lane assignments here are much easier. You can say, okay, well, if Lucian's mid, we can just put Zeri bot and we can put Corki mid, and Corki's going to have a fine time into the Lucian, right? So probably looking at something like that. We end up going for the Brand. Now, Brand is really, really good into a lot of melee champs. I think that's Brand's best, that he's like an anti-melee champion, right? And since blue are indexing into engage, odds are a lot of what they're going to pick here is going to be melee. And the more melee it is, the better it gets for Brand, and also the better it gets for Zeri. So I think it's looking quite good for C9 so far. Now, I would look to ban out some bot lane pairings with the Nautilus that could really throw a spanner in the works. So far, we are quite vulnerable, so I think this is going to be some like melee engage, or like close range engage champions that can snowball through us early. So I'm thinking like Draven, I'm thinking like Samira. I would be thinking Callista if it wasn't already gone. I think these would be some good bans on the blue side. Alternatively, on the red side, sorry. Alternatively, we can look to target some top lane bans. We could maybe take away... I'm not entirely sure what I would ban in top lane, honestly. Like, we're worried about engage, but we like when they pick melee. So yeah, I think Samira is a very, very good ban though, because Samira with the W is going to block a lot of what Brand wants to do. She can cancel the Brand R. She's going to have a great time in lane into the Zeri, especially with a Nautilus. It's going to be a really, really powerful duo. So I'd probably look to take away the Samira and probably Draven as well. For blue side, let me think about bans here. We want to ban out disengage tools, right? So I'd be looking at maybe Braum Taric. That sounds pretty good as blue side bans. And then if we are going Samira, that's really, really good with the Braum Taric ban. Alternatively, we could look to ban out the Lulu because they have Zeri, so Lulu's also quite a good disengage pick. Though then they're playing 4 range and they don't really have anyone to frontline except their top laner, who they're going to have to pick. So I think an actual tanky melee support is probably better for C9. Let's skip forward. So they ban out Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa's another champion that can play engage, right? It can follow up. And they end up banning out the MF. So they're not willing to... I think it would be better to ban out, like, Samira. And you could maybe go Kai'Sa or Draven. And then you pick the Braum on 4. And then with the Braum on 4, it really completes, it really rounds out what you get. You get some frontline, you get some disengage tools. And also you block the MF as a pick, because that lane is really not... that champion really, really suffers into Braum, because he can block her up. Then we end up going for Leona and Cassante. Cassante actually is a very good ban here, I think. It brings exactly what C9 want. It's a frontline disengage champion. It's perfect. Leona can kind of function as a frontline disengage champion. This is what Mad Lions picked. I think she's just a little overtuned at the minute, so she's being overly picked. But something like Braum is more thematic, and that's what I would like to see. Okay, nice. We go for the Braum. See, I can't actually remember the exact drafts. I just remember that, obviously, if you've seen the thumbnail, I remember what I'm going to see now and hating it. So they go for Rakan, right? So we're really, really indexing into engage. One weird thing is this now means we're playing Nautilus top, which means we get top counter on R5 into Nautilus. We can pick whatever we want into this. We have Rakan, Nautilus. We also have Lilia. This is a lot of engage. But we're picking engage into Braum, into Brand, and into 2 really, really safe carries with high range. So, yeah, I don't think this is a good game to play engage. And then, weirdly, the weirdest pick of the draft comes out here. They end up going for Nilah. Now, Nilah as a champion, to me, is like the bot lane Illaoi. And what do I mean by that? Illaoi is really, really happy when the enemy comp has to run into her, because she creates like so much space around her with tentacles and stuff that you don't want to run into. This space is really, really hard to run into, right? Now, Nilah, she's not great at going forward. She has her E-dash, and that's kind of it. She doesn't even have Gale Force anymore, so it's even harder to go forward than it used to be. Gumayushi managed to go forwards with Gale Force Nilah against LNG at Worlds last year, but even then it was kind of hard for him to execute. I think it took his Gale Force and his Flash, whereas Nilah on her own, she's very, very low range, okay? But what she does is absolutely melt tanks She melts tanks, she does tons of DPS, and all of her damage is AoE, okay? In terms of like this sort of stuff, but especially this one, she's very similar to Xayah, okay? And in regards to her similarity to Xayah, Xayah has the added safety of her ult, right? Nilah has the added safety of her W, and her W is really, really potent against particularly melee, to double L, sorry, there's only one L in melee, particularly melee, but just auto attackers, okay? Now, these two, to be fair, Nilah W has some value. Braum passive, Nilah W has some value. The problem is, Nilah, as a disengage themed champion, really, really struggles to ever get into range of Corki, or get into range of Zeri, or get into range of Brand, or get through Braum. These are really, really difficult things for her to do, and I don't think this comp is at all playable for Nilah. Also, Corki rockets are just blasting her, Zeri Ws are blasting her, Brand spells are blasting her, because, like, with her being low range and melee and following the engage, she's going to be in close proximity to these two, which is going to allow Brand to bounce spells onto her. So yeah, I really don't think Nilah is the pick here. And then all we have to do on C9 here is pick something stable in top that can do fine into the Nautilus and can help us disengage. Now, I do think Cassante would be absolutely perfect. However, there is also a champion that I think is also very good. We could go top lane Poppy. This would be incredible. Alternatively, if we want magic damage, because we already have 2 AD carries, we could go top lane Gragas. I think this is also incredible in this spot. But I do remember what they end up going. It's a stable tank, it's reliable, it's not entirely disengage themed, and it's not the best, but we end up picking up this Ornn here. Now, Ornn, honestly, is actually giving Nilah some value because she can avoid the brittle procs, and she can shred him, and he's going to be in melee range, and he's not peeling to the extent that other tanks are. I really do feel like Poppy would just be an absolute nail in the coffin here, and it would be completely unplayable for blue side. But either way, this is a very, very difficult Nilah game for the reasons I've explained, right? She can hit Ornn, she can kind of hit Braum sometimes. I don't know how she ever hits any of these three. Meanwhile, these three are just completely blasting away. Your Rakan has to find a way in through Braum onto 2 carries that both have escape. Your Lucian has to find a culling through Braum and Ornn. Your Nautilus can press R on Zeri, but then she can just E over a wall. Your Lilia has to try to hit an E onto these guys with Braum and Ornn standing in front of them. It's very, very difficult to play what is essentially a full engage comp with a random Nilah into a very, very hard disengage support with 2 champs that love to kite back, and also Brand loves to kite back, and then you just have another tank to frontline here. So yes, I think this was a very, very bad Nilah game, and also a pretty good draft from C9. The only thing that I would like massively change would be the R5 pick, but other than that, I think C9 drafted really well. And yeah, thanks for watching this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed the review, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.